how do the COVID-induced schools closures affect the ability of students to prepare for the world of work?
Yeah, so I'm sure we've all forgotten about COVID. It's been a while, but just as a reminder, 2 years ago, around the world, we closed schools and universities. More than 1.5 billion children and youth were affected. Schooling was disrupted, either closed completely or went hybrid, usually closed completely. That's 200 days were lost on average. That's in academic years, that's a year and a half. Some countries were closed for 2 years. And now, 2 years later, and we know that from the countries reporting that there's a lot of learning that was lost, both in terms of what you didn't gain from being in school, but also things you forgot. And the longer your school was closed, the more you forgot. On average, 20 weeks of school closures, which is the average worldwide, is about a year's worth of learning. So it didn't take very long to lose that year. So in terms of education or the human capital that the world has, we lost a whole year. At the same time, we paid for it. Budgets weren't reduced, so we paid for basically no education. And hit hardest were poor children, disadvantaged children that were already struggling in school, fell behind. Probably a lot of children that were close to compulsory school age never went back. And this has consequences for your schooling, your progress in school, your access to higher levels, high school, university, and also your productivity. And we know it's going to suffer. People will earn less as a result of the lost year of schooling in terms of learning. And that will affect their ability to provide for their families. It will slow down the growth of the economy. We estimate that the school closures in terms of the lost wages in the future is 0.8% of GDP annual terms. So a huge part of the growth. Income and money isn't everything, but it's one aspect of our society, and education has reduced that. If we add all the other benefits of schooling that people talked about, people's ability to interact, to work in teams and such, that's also lost. Can't measure it as easily, but we know that's lost. But in terms of concrete terms, we know we've lost about a year of schooling. And in terms of income, that's a sizable portion of people's future earnings. Now, you might say, well, school's opened, so we're fine. Kids are back to school, everything's fine. We know from past crises, even from the 1918 influenza or the pandemics since then, those losses accumulate and we can't get it all back. So we have lost quite a bit. There's a lot we can do in the interim, but we need to acknowledge that there was a loss, and certain populations were affected more than others. Who was affected more? The poor, especially people in poorer countries. They stayed closed longer. Those children fell further behind in their schooling.